If a man hasn't done this, hasn't accessed, their pain or looked within, when a woman comes and she starts to show emotions, it freaks him out because it's like highlighting back to him what is repressed within him.
On this week's podcast episode, I talk with sexuality and tantric coach Nadine Lee about the awakened female, sexual trauma, sexual liberation, the importance of getting out of your head, men holding space, the dark feminine, the importance of regulating your nervous system, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Podcast by myself, Blake Worrell-Thompson.
And me, Genoa Van Keekum. Momentum is a men's wellbeing and performance community dedicated to helping men be better.
Each week we deep dive with your favourite thought leaders and experts from around the world to get their insights to help you be better. Enjoy the episode. Now, guys, before we get started on this week's podcast, I want to talk to you about our Momentum Mastermind. The Mastermind is our 12-month program for men who want to surround themselves with other committed men, all with similar interests, values, and goals. Whether you're looking to build or grow a profitable lifestyle business, develop financial freedom, get in the best shape of your life, or create an intimate and epic relationship, the Mastermind is perfect for those who are looking to have it all. We know that to create these results and this kind of lifestyle on your own can be super challenging. So join now for your free 30-day trial. Simply visit our website, www.themomentumlifestyle.com.au. Up the top, you'll see a section for programs. Click on the programs, you'll see our mastermind, and you can sign up there now for your free 30-day trial valued at $1,000. We look forward to seeing you part of the mastermind. Nadine Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Plenty for us to talk about. Sexuality, sex precess, masculine, feminine energies. But before we get started, can you give the guys a 60 to 90 second spiel of your life and what's got you to where you are now?
60 seconds.
See how you go. Do your best.
Yeah. Okay. So my name is Nadine Lee and I'm the founder of Tantric Alchemy, which is a platform that helps women and men awaken their erotic energy so they can step into their life's purpose and create thriving relationships with themselves and their partners. And that's really been born from my own personal journey, like from as young as 6 years old, questioning God and having these deeply transcendental experiences and explorations of my own sexuality. Really being on that path from such a young age, it just feels like this path has really chosen me. And my life's work is an extension of that. So I've been through my own healing journey and healing sexual trauma, doing deep, my own inner work. And what I'm teaching now and sharing now is just really what has influenced me and helped me, come into my fullest expression. And that's still unfolding, as time goes on. So, yeah.
That was pretty close to 60 seconds.
Yeah.
You did well. So
Thanks.
In that, the erotic energy, what does that mean and where does someone even begin to explore what is their erotic energy?
Well, really, I feel the first step is getting out of the head and coming into your body and seeing erotic energy as really just life force energy that is always moving through you. It's not confined to sex. Like that's when we most experience, our sexual energy and that orgasmic energy or like blasting open. But really like that pulse of orgasmic energy is always moving through you. And if you really start to move from your mind and drop into your body, you can start to feel that beyond just the bedroom. And so, it's really a way of life. And yeah, erotic energy to me is just the same as life force energy.
What does that look like for you? You mentioned some of your own kind of sexual trauma that you've moved through and healed, which no doubt would impact your own erotic energy. What have you noticed in terms of, because most people, their association, I would assume, is bedroom and that's where it stays. But what does that look like for you in terms of how your erotic energy is expressed in life and where and how it shows up in life outside of the bedroom?
Yeah. So usually, if we've experienced any trauma, we've all experienced something whether it's soft or hardcore trauma, where the most common response to a traumatic experience as a child, this is usually where it first forms, is to flight, leave the body. So often that's what happens, and often we don't fully come back into our body until we do the healing work and revisit the original trauma and realize that, it's safe to be in the body now. We're not still stuck in that child consciousness. So that's really one of the issues on the planet right now, is that most people are in flight response on a day-to-day basis, like not even in their bodies. So if you're not feeling safe in your body, then you can't really feel that orgasmic energy or erotic energy moving through you. So really the first step is to heal the traumas that we have that are keeping us from inhabiting our bodies and fully feeling what's present there, because often it's safer to live in the mind and just stay there because we have control there, and it's not going to send us on a downward spiral, once we access an emotion that's sometimes been repressed for our whole life, up until the time you face it. So that's key to accessing your eros.
So when you think about your own experience, and you're welcome to kind of go into as much or little as you want, and you mentioned your own traumas, and it's a really good point to understand for most people, because when they think trauma, they think big things, but really to be aware that we all have trauma, whether that's big T or little t. But when it comes to your own experience, what have you noticed as you've gone through your own healing journey in terms of that erotic energy and how that kind of shows up in everyday life?
Yeah, well, just as I've kind of come deeper into my body and felt safe in my body, I've noticed a correlation with, being more attuned to erotic energy moving through me at any given time. It can be just not just sexual experiences. It can be just, being in nature and feeling so deeply in my body and feeling the senses of all nature around me. And that can be an orgasmic experience, or eating like a beautiful meal. It's like just becoming more and more present to life and embodied in everyday activities, and being fully immersed in them is orgasmic, really.
Yeah. What's that process been like for you in terms of, not sure exactly how long your healing journey's been, but what's that process been like for you? And how would someone start to identify that they potentially aren't as connected to self as they could be, or even, get the kind of fruits of life that you're speaking of? What's that process been like for you?
Yeah, it's just been, like, as I said, feeling safe in the body. And I think, as a lot of women just by default don't feel safe in their body. You ask any woman, like, if she walks down a dark street at night, she's not going to feel safe. Just that's the society that we unfortunately are living in. So there's that. And then there's the traumas that prevent us from being in the body. So it's really been facing the parts of me that were frozen as a child, not feeling safe. So that's, what we call the inner child processing, or soul, reclaiming fragments of your soul that get fragmented, from traumas as a child. And those practices have been very powerful in feeling safe in the body.
What modalities have you used, and what's that look like? Because there's so many different ways to come back into the body and to heal the trauma, but what has your own process been, and what's a process or modalities that you encourage women in particular to use as they kind of heal this process?
Yeah, so working with the nervous system is key. So practices that help you relax into the parasympathetic state. So, yoga, meditation, even things like yin yoga, more like feminine yoga that really drops you into that space of relaxation. And then really the womb work has been the biggest one as a woman, working with dropping into the womb. And with that comes healing the inner child and facing the unconscious, because the womb as a woman is really the portal of the unconscious. It's where we store a lot of these repressed memories and stagnant emotions as a result of traumas. So womb work is the biggest modality that I've found like really, really takes you there. It's the descension, from the mind and descending deeply into the body. And that's the deepest portal of a feminine bodied being is their womb. So, and men can do this as well. It's just essentially just dropping into, like out of the mind and into the body and facing off with the emotions and the physical sensations, even just presencing what's happening in your body, such as simple practice, like how am I feeling physically? Usually if there's any physical ailments that are happening or any negative sensations or pains or whatever in your physical body, when you presence that, what's underneath that is always an emotional sensation and strong emotion. So that's really what we want to go into is like any physical thing that's happening in your body is just the surface layer for something deeper, which is a stuck emotion that wants to be felt essentially. And so then it's really about having tools of how to feel and express and release these strong emotions. So things like rage might come up. One of the best practices for releasing rage is like screaming into a pillow beating, like really getting your whole body into releasing that strong emotions, fire energy. And then there's, like fear. Fear is stored in so many of, like usually in our root chakra in the hips, So for releasing that is usually one of the best practices is shaking, somatic shaking. Like an animal does that, just naturally. They shake their whole body to release fear after they've just almost been eaten, in the wild. So we can do that as well. As it's such a powerful way to reset the nervous system and release fear from the body, shaking. And then, things like shame, releasing shame is really working with the hips, so like hip movements, circular movements, working even for women, that really opens up the sacral because it's where we store a lot of the shame. And even for men, I've got a men doing like hip thrusts and like just, even men love to be taught how to twerk. I've noticed this. They're like, teach me how to twerk. So, like moving strong energy through your body, like these emotions want to get expressed and released in that way. And then sadness, is obviously crying, like drop into the deepest, like when you feel like you can't cry anymore, where it's like your heart feels like it's being ripped out of your chest. Like you want to get to that point because when you touch the core of the emotion, then it releases fully and there's so much more space in your energy body.
You spoke of a couple of areas then in terms of where certain emotions are felt and stored in the body. So fear and shame and their relationship to hips. If someone's taking a look at their own physical body or even pain body, what are other emotions that might be stored in specific areas of their body?
Yeah, so usually it's like fear is in the root. So it's around like, the buttocks, anus, like the genitals even. Shame is also stored in the genitals and the womb for women. And then I feel anger often gets stored. Well, in Chinese medicine, it's stored in different organs. It's stored in the liver, but I feel it's also can be stored in that like center solar plexus. So when we like feel like anger, it's like usually it's that fire element, which is the solar plexus. So it can manifest as digestion issues, things like this. And also anger gets expressed through like skin, like because it is linked to the liver. So like if you have like skin issues like rashes or acne, that's usually like anger that's repressed. It's like literally like trying to purge out of your skin. And then, grief and sadness is the lungs and the heart, these areas. So, if there's like breath issues like asthma and then like obviously heart issues, I feel that's just always linked with sadness and grief, unprocessed grief.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're the main ones.
Awesome description. So when it comes to someone starting to become more attuned and back in their body, from my own personal experience and a number of people in our world, it can be quite challenging. It's almost like their window of tolerance is really small and just starting to feel that initial emotion, that they're kind of looking for ways to distract or suppress it, having disconnected from it for so long. If someone's starting this process, What do you encourage in terms of starting to come back into the body and honor the emotions that come up and just being able to sit with them? What was that process like for you and through your clients? What do you encourage as people come back into their body?
Yeah, so you don't want to go too deep too soon. And I always feel whenever I'm guiding a group or a client one-on-one through a process like this, I always say to them, like, you can trust yourself. Like, you're not going to go somewhere beyond your capacity. And I'm not going to push you there. Like, I'm guiding you. I could push, like some teachers do push them, but like I just hold the invitation, and that way the client, they go to where they're able to go. And that might be just one layer of the onion that gets peeled off. And then maybe the next session, it's like another layer. You know, it's like you want to go slow so you don't re-traumatize the person.
Totally get it. So when it comes to trauma, and you mentioned earlier safety and creating safety within your body so that you can come back into your body, what can the masculine do to make this process easier and provide safety from their side of things?
Well, I think really for men to do this work themselves first, because often I notice is if a man hasn't done this, hasn't accessed, their pain or looked within, when a woman comes and she starts to show emotions, it freaks him out because it's like highlighting back to him what is repressed within him. And so he'll want to like shut that off. It's like, oh, shit, don't bring that here because it's just too painful to look at, So I feel as for men to do that work, that shadow work themselves with, brothers or coach or whatever, however that looks. So then he can, when she comes with something that's happening, he can just hold like presence and just be that clear channel and not feel it's triggering something within him that is also repressed, Yeah, that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you've got a new book coming out in Feb, which when this is released will probably be Feb. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so it's called Sex Priestess, and it's really the journey from sexual trauma to sexual liberation. And for a guide, a roadmap, for women to start this journey of descension, of embodiment, and reclaiming their power and their sexual expression, however that looks. And so I kind of teach from my own experience. It's part memoir, part self-help. So I'm sharing real life, like my actual journey and real things that have happened to me and all the key teachings that have influenced me over my journey the past 20 years on this path, and then offer, a roadmap with certain practices and journal prompts and just techniques to take women on that journey. And yeah, that's my deepest intention with it. And for women to really remember, the power of their erotic energy and the power of their feminine through this book being like an initiation really into that. So it's also, men can also read it. I just got interviewed by a man this morning and he was like, can men read it? And I said, yeah, for sure. Because, it's like, I've read so many books from men about men, like, like the David Data books, the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover book, and it's for men, but I've read it and really learned a lot about men through that. So I feel men can read this and learn a lot about women and also remember, the power of fully empowered sexual woman, and noticing what comes up within them, because I feel that a lot of men want to control a woman like that, suppress that because it can be like very confronting. So it can be an initiation for men as well as they read this book. And there's also practices like what I just shared, the emotional alchemy practice that's in the book in more detail, like how to really purify the body so you can actually inhabit it and feel your sexual energy moving within you.
So what's behind the name and what's the importance of understanding different archetypes when it comes to how you embody them and show up differently depending on the archetype?
Yeah, so the name Sex Priestess is really, I see it as interchangeable with Tantra. because Tantra is really the path of union of, all opposites, all dualities coming in to meet in that union point. So, sex and spirit, light and dark, masculine, feminine, it's the union point. And sex priestess is like two opposing ends of the spectrum, sexuality and spiritual realm. So it's really this path of integrating those two parts of us as women and as humans, just really bringing in the meeting point of those two. And what was the next question about archetypes?
The importance of archetypes, and maybe even a little bit on what the priestess archetype is, just so people understand that.
Yeah, so the priestess is really the aspect of us as women, the male version would be the priest, or the mystic. It's the aspect of us that sees beyond the seen realms. It's the part of us that can dance between the unseen and the seen and kind of be in this world but not of it, and kind of anchor the mystical realms into this physical reality. She dances between the worlds, and she is an initiator of awakening, really, through that. So she's like this doula of people's souls, taking them on these rebirthing experiences. So, being a sex priestess, it's really using the sexual energy and that tantric energy to awaken and rebirth anyone who comes into contact with her.
So when it comes to archetypes, how would you explain that to someone who's new to that terminology? And what are some of the archetypes that the women might look to explore or even embody?
Yeah, so the archetypes are really powerful. It's a powerful tool to access different aspects of our unconscious. So often we are, we develop our personality and the external world kind of like reflects back to us one dimension of who we are, and often when we're a child, there's certain behavior and archetypes that are more favorable. We realize, when I'm the sweet girl, I get more love from everyone, or I'm the good boy, I get more love, or when I'm a naughty boy, I get more attention. So we form these archetypes and these parts of our personality that are very one-dimensional, and it can limit us. Whereas we're actually multi-dimensional, and there's so many different aspects of us and expressions of us that want to move through. And often archetypes show us what part of us has been repressed. So a certain archetype that we expressed as a child may have not given us the love that we wanted from our external environment. So we're like, I'm going to put that side of me away. And really doing archetypal work is really reclaiming those parts of you, because that's usually where your power lies, is in the part of you that you've cast into the shadows and been like, I don't want to express that side of me because it equals love withdrawn. Whereas there's actually a lot of power in that part of you. So yeah, the women, different archetypes you can explore, like the priestess, the maiden, the wild woman, the queen, seductress, the lover. It's kind of similar to maiden. So I think the most repressed in women is the darker feminine. It's like the seductress or the stripper archetype. This side of women is very repressed. But every time we do this archetypal work, whenever I'm taking women through these archetypal journeys, that's the one where everyone's like just going off. Like they're just like, yes, I finally have an outlet to express this side of me, And it's just like so much like reclamation happens in those containers. So yeah, and I feel it's similar for men, as well. Like the darker masculine side, it's also very repressed in society, just in general. It's just the dark feminine and dark masculine is often, cast to the shadows.
What are the behaviors or attributes that you would associate with the dark feminine and the dark masculine? And we might be pointing out the obvious when you explain those as to why they've been suppressed, but why do you believe they've been suppressed?
Because once we access those parts of us, we can't be controlled by governments and institutions, because we reclaim our sovereignty, we reclaim our sexuality. And when we're deeply in touch with our sexuality, we are sovereign. So it's just goes back to as early as the Bible, the story of Eve and Lilith. Like Eve was favored over Lilith because she was the good girl. She was subservient. She did everything Adam said. Whereas Lilith, she was, like a wild woman, and she was just like seductress, and she wanted to be on top, and she just knew what she wanted sexually. And so the story is she gets cast out. So there's this like imprint that if you are not subservient to something else, you're exiled from the Garden of Eden. So women have that very strong in their psyche, and that's really what we're reclaiming. And I feel the sex priestess is part of that. It's like merging Eve and Lilith. We can be both. And it's not one or the other. We're all faces of the goddess.
So when you think about your own journey with the dark feminine, how has that been, and how has that been held or even potentially struggle with partners? And the reason I say this is you brought up earlier for many, the masculine's inability to hold those energies and those darknesses and those edges. So what's been your own journey with that, and how have you found that play out in relating?
Yeah, well, I noticed when I was just exploring and wasn't like exploring the dark feminine and wasn't fully integrated in her, I would attract partners who would suppress her. But the more I've integrated her and she's like solid within me, no man can tell me that it's wrong or like unlovable. And so I don't attract men that have that kind of wound that will suppress that. I attract men now who have done their own integration work around their darkness and faced, their abandonment wounds, because I think that's what it comes down to, is like the fear of the woman, being so sexually liberated, she might abandon him and leave him. And so there has to be, facing of that from the men's side. But I really just always, say this, it's like the more a man can celebrate a woman in her full erotic expression, the more power he gains as a man into his masculinity. The more he's like suppressing her and trying to keep her boxed and contained, she's going to shrivel up and die, like energetically. And so he won't be in his fullness because his woman is miserable, It's like that saying, like the happy wife, happy life. Like she wants to be in her fullness, and that gives more, that feeds back to him. Like it just fuels him, when his woman is happy. I'm sure you can agree with that. Like, so you don't want a woman who's like miserable and just like feeling like she's withering away. So it's like, it's so important for men to do that, face that fear of the woman shining so bright, and being so erotically liberated, because she brings that so much to him and fuels him in his masculinity.
What do you think that is? I mean, control gets used often as a answer for men kind of suppressing, which again goes back since the start of time pretty much. And also from a shadow or a projection, his inability to explore his own darkness and then not be able to hold her in hers. Is there anything else that you think, based on the work that you've done and what you've seen in your coaching and relationships, is there anything else that might be a blind spot for guys that's impacting that ability to hold her in her fullness, do you think?
Yeah, a brother recently just shared that what comes up for him and some of his men clients was it's intimidating, because it's like having to hold that much power. It's a lot to hold. So his nervous system, it's like a fear of losing control, because his body might, respond in a way where he feels like he's just going to lose control, and like, lose control of his body, like ejaculate or, like whatever it is. It's like, whoa, I'm not in control of my body because I'm getting like seduced by something so powerful. So it's this fear of losing control of like themselves.
You mentioned their nervous system, which I think is heavily underrated in this work. What do you see is the impact of regulating the nervous system and potentially even expanding your window of tolerance from both the feminine side of things, but also the masculine?
Yeah, I think that's key. like for just, I practice Kundalini yoga, and that part of Kundalini yoga is to strengthen the nervous system, which strengthens your auric field. So you can actually hold more in your life. So, we can hold more in our business, we can hold more in our families, in our partnerships. So the stronger your nervous system is, then the greater the capacity is to actually hold more, So doing nervous system training is essential. And Kundalini yoga, all yoga strengthens the nervous system, but Kundalini specifically really, really strengthens it in a rapid way.
Yeah. So when it comes to blokes and their ability to support the feminine stepping into her fullness and her fullest expression, we've obviously mentioned kind of shadow work and doing your own shadow work so that you can explore your darkness and then hold her in hers, and the importance of the nervous system. What are some other things that blokes might want to consider in terms of relating and their ability to hold the fullest liberated feminine in relationships?
Yeah, I feel it's the first thing that comes is just to understand the nature of the feminine is always evolving and changing, and that to be that kind of solid anchor point, for her waves. It's like, she's Shakti, she's moving, she's got all this like life force energy that's like wanting to create, and it can be very like fluctuating, like one day she wants to do this, the next day she wants to do this. And so just to understand that, like, not to take everything so like set in stone, just kind of be that like rock where like the water just washes through, And also I feel one of the biggest things is, her emotions obviously are like water as well. Like can be fluctuating, but also for men to develop their nervous system to have strong boundaries, because it's not just because you're a man, you're meant to take emotional, spears throwing at you, like that's not what we're promoting. Like that's more, like unhealthy feminine that's just like going to project all her emotional like vomit onto the man. So knowing that having boundaries is important and like that helps a woman also grow if that's what you're experiencing, a woman just kind of like dumping everything onto you. And that's also the woman's work. A lot of what I teach women is around developing your own inner healthy masculine to, bring in your consciousness when emotions get out of control. It's like you need to bring in that like that rationale sometimes just to like take yourself out of a situation and regulate yourself, express your emotions so it doesn't destroy everything around you. And that's a journey for women to take. And it really helps in relationship with men. So there's less of a like projection of them onto the man.
So how would you, because I think this is a really interesting space that a lot of blokes get confused with, how do you decipher what is, and I'll get you to kind of explain the boundaries bit because it kind of answers the question, but how do you, guys are like, do I empathize and have compassion to that emotion, but that emotion's a projection, and where's the boundaries? And a bloke's like, fuck, do I like allow it all? Do I allow none? They kind of get lost in that, in knowing how to hold themselves. So is there any recommendation on how a bloke deciphers where to be empathetic and compassionate, where to be assertive and have boundaries? Like, what's that kind of space in between look like?
I feel like for me personally, when a man's just holding like that Shiva energy, just the witness, and if I'm expressing something, how I'm feeling, or even if I'm just crying or just expressing an emotion, if he's just in full presence what happens within me is it alchemizes very quick because he's just holding space for it. He's not trying to fix it or take me back into my mind. This is the worst thing that men can do, is like a woman's in her emotional, chaos, and then he's like trying to fix it, and give her feedback and coach her and give her a strategy to get out of this situation. And that just prolongs the the emotional scenarios. So just knowing that is just key. It's just hold the space, let it wash through her. And then if it doesn't, if it's taking a long time and then she starts to kind of like point fingers and attack, that's where I feel like, and the boundaries need to come. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. And to just kind of piggyback off what you said as well, and again, I think a lot of blokes get lost with this, is understanding what full presence means, because there's a lot of blokes who are numb or disassociate and think that because they're standing there blindly or blankly that that's full presence, but like really being in your body to full presence. And I think, guys at the start of this journey probably struggled to understand the difference between being numb and being neutral in terms of really kind of being embodied. So I think that's a big piece to cater into that as well. If men, women, or any type want to explore you and your work, where's the best spot for them to find you?
So on Instagram, I'm at Tantric Alchemy Official, or one word, and my website, www.tantricalchemy.net.
Beautiful. And I believe that you've got shut down recently.
Yeah, so my old Instagram got deleted in March last year, in 2022. So I'm on the rebuild and yeah.
Do you know specifically what it was? I mean, if you're in the sexuality space, it could be 1,001 things, but are you aware of the final straw?
No, it was just one day, just gone.
Nightmare, absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you jumping on and giving us insight into the work that you do, all things sexuality, and the book that you're releasing in Feb. So I'll put that in the show notes as well and get people to check out your work.
Yes, amazing. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.